All right, well, let's call this meeting to order. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
There's a flag on this already, one over here.
Oh, turn it on one.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to have the clerk. We have a new planning commissioner, so the clerk could administer the oath of office.
I, Ashley Watson, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the City Charter and Code of Ordinances of the City of Cedar Springs, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of planning commission member to the best of my ability.
Hi, welcome, Ashley.
Welcome. All right. Mr. Gray has asked to be excused tonight. Mrs. Burma.
Here.
Mr. Conley. Here. Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. McGrath is also asked to be excused tonight. Mr. Dixon. Here. Mr. Owens.
Here.
Mr. Watson.
Here.
And the other Mr. Owens. We have Tim Johnson, our city planner, Mike Womack, our city manager, and Rebecca Johnson, our city clerk, with us tonight. If we could take a look at our August 13 minutes for that meeting, and if you've had a chance to review that, we need a motion to approve those minutes, please.
I'll make that motion.
I actually have a small correction on here. Under the open discussion part, there's something that's attributed to Harrison Owens. It was actually Craig Owens. Thanking Mr. Conley for chairing the last meeting. But given that, then I will motion to success.
Support her.
Yes.
All right, any other changes or anything you see in there? Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes with that minor change, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Thank you. And turn your attention to our agenda for this evening. Need a motion, please, to approve that.
I'll motion to approve.
Support. Okay. Anything on there that you see that we need to adjust? Okay, all in favor of approving that agenda, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. All right. Public comments. If you have something that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear from you. We do have some public hearings scheduled where we can hear from you again more specifically on those two items that are under the public hearings. But if there's something else on your mind that you would like to share with us, you can step up to the podium and we're all ears. And just for the clerk, when you step over, if you could tell her your name too, so she can get that into our minutes.
And Amy Madison.
Well, good evening. My name is Sue Norton, and this is Amy Madison. We come before you tonight asking that Amy be allowed to join us at the North Kent Senior Citizens Association building. I know that way back some 15, 20 years ago, the city had allowed us to move in there, and at that time it was myself, another massage therapist, Kim Gillow, and a chiropractor, Ben Gillis. Prior to us being there, the health department was in there. So when they had moved out, the center was worried that they would have to close their doors due to lack of income. And so we had went to the city, and they had said that we could move in under the requirement that we would be doing health-related services. And as a massage therapist, we are licensed under the state of Michigan under LAURA, and that's also under the Bureau of Professional Licensing, whose mission is actually to protect, preserve, and improve the health, safety, and welfare of Michigan citizens through licensing and regulation. Amy, who is a beautician, is actually licensed under the same regulation population as Laura as we are. And so by allowing her to join us at the center, it would greatly help the seniors keep up their building without having to shut it down. From the time we actually originally had moved in there and now, besides the chiropractor and then Kim and I, a massage therapist, we also had a counselor in there. We had Sonas Hackley Hearing in there. And we also had a lady that did electrolysis. So, I mean, all kind of health-related things, which is what the city at that time said that we could do. So by her moving in, it will help us keep the maintenance, the upkeep, the snow plowing, the mowing, all the little things to keep the building going. She is also willing to give our senior members free haircuts, which most of our senior members are low income, so it's a wonderful benefit to have her in there. And she just told me tonight too that, as you know, some of the older people have a hard time getting to their toes, and she is actually willing to work on their toes and their feet as well. So that would be a big benefit to our seniors. We believe in complementing the existing character of our community with beneficial health-related services. We aim to serve the local population as well as striving to save the center and their building. Besides the senior citizens using the building, we also have the Cedar Springs Lions Club in there and the Church of God, which has been in the building since 1952. So the rooms and businesses in this building support a cottage industry to serve the residents of Cedar Springs. By not using all the rooms in our senior center, the building is not used to its highest and best potential to serve the seniors or the citizens of our city. Local licensed professionals renting rooms now, as they have in the past, will help contribute to pay for the expenses for this building to keep it going. The renting of rooms to licensed professionals, which the city had allowed for years, is a unique way for the building to be preserved for the use of our service groups, as well as offering services to the citizens of Cedar Springs. Our seniors are an amazing, wonderful group of people. By allowing Amy to join us at the center, it would help them to maintain their building and provide services to them. We are not asking for just any business to be allowed into the center, but to allow another licensed professional who is willing to provide a health-related service to our seniors as well as to our community. I did make a copy of this letter that I can hand out to everybody as
Yeah,
well.
if you give it to the clerk,
Yeah.
and she can include it in our
Yeah.
packet later.
Questions?
Amy, is there anything you wanted to say?
Nope, we can work together on that, so.
Well, yeah, so I'm sure that you've been in touch with Mr. Womack on what we need to probably do to proceed from here, so, there.
So, Mr. Owens, if I could interject
Yes.
just for a second, just to bring some light on what's going on here. So, I was approached and asked if they could add another business to this building. This building is in the R1 zoning district, which only allows certain uses. Commercial, massage, commercial, haircutting is not one of those uses. And I understand and respect the fact that at some point 15 years ago, somebody at the city says, yeah, sure, go ahead, do it. But my interpretation of the zoning indicates you can't just keep adding businesses to an R1 zone property. So, we're all aware of non-conforming use, grandfathering in. So it was my decision at that time that the businesses that are currently operating there, they can continue to operate there. But if you add in businesses, now you're creating an expansion of the non-conforming use. I did have some discussions with these individuals and told them what I thought maybe could be an arrangement that might be able to work out. But moving a new business in there full time, I feel, would be a violation of the non-conformity. So what I recommended to them was to come in and speak with you, but also to bring in some kind of recommendation for how we could maybe fit in with what the rules say. I couldn't think of a good reason, or a good change that could be proposed that would allow them, but not allow, say, a Target to open up in an R1 zoning district. So I'm open to ideas, I just couldn't think of any by myself.
We were hoping that possibly under the idea that none of us actually are working full-time there, so it'd be part-time. And where we actually have to be licensed under the state, and it's a health service, that possibly that might give us a way to get in there, get her in there.
And none of us have high traffic, there's not high traffic cars in and out.
I mean, it's not like a Target that would have a ton of people. All of our neighbors that are around us, except one, just love us because we're very quiet. It's a relaxing atmosphere, and we just want to keep the building going. I mean, it's been historically there with health services all these years, and benefits with the church and everything, and the seniors, and our senior group is growing, and we just want to keep it going.
Well, so Amy, if you would let us do this, since this is the first time that we've heard this, so we need some time to digest it too, but, maybe we can, maybe Mr. Johnson, Mr. Womack might be able to come up with something that we could then consider. We don't have anything in front of us that we can come up with a solution tonight, but if they could possibly put together a memo or give us some guidance inside the zoning laws of what we might be able to do, and then that gives us a chance to kind of digest that and put our collective heads together and see if we can come up with something.
Okay.
Because I don't think we can make a decision tonight, with it being the first time that we're hearing it and, trying to figure out all the nuances of that. So, would that be all right if we just let them kind of dig through some stuff and then give us some direction, and then we can?
What's the next step for us? So should we ask to be like on the next agenda? Can we wait for the
I guess
next?
my recommendation would for them to be keeping in touch with me,
Yeah.
because I did have some solutions I thought might work, which I wanted, I guess, talk further with both the planning commission and Mr. Johnson here. So maybe if they can contact me next week at work, that might be the best step for the next step.
That sounds good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Would this service general public walk-in or just the senior citizens at that establishment?
I have about 30 clients that I'll bring with me. But again, I'm 20 hours or less a week.
So you would be opening it to the general public?
I will not be advertising. It will be just those few clients that I bring with me from where I'm currently working, that's it. So I won't have the doors open, and I won't have like a sign out that says, walk-ins welcome, nothing like that. It'll just be, and all my clients will contact me directly. I don't have a line that calls, and she doesn't take phone calls from me. They come call my phone, make an appointment, I come in. So it's by appointment only, and it's just my clients, which right now I work 20 hours-ish a week, and then I will be adding the seniors in. Yep.
Can you look at if there is, because if I'm not mistaken, in order to have a service like that, you have to have certain drains and stuff like that in a building. Can you look at that and see what the code says?
Yeah, I mean, the city doesn't have any code specific to that.
I thought it was a code I thought it was a building code.
Yeah, it might be a health code on point.
So I was just wondering, see if you could look into that for us.
So, thanks for sharing, appreciate it.
Thank you.
So make sure that you touch base with them next week.
Absolutely. Do you want a copy of this letter?
Did you is that what you gave to us?
I gave one to her, but
Yeah,
I actually
sure.
have a
So
copy for everybody.
She'll get it to us.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comments. Folks, any conflict of interest or ex parte communication you need to report based on our agenda for tonight? Okay, seeing none, so we will move to some public hearings today. So I will open the public hearing on 228 North Main Street, the special land use for O'Dowd Landscaping. I believe that is page 60 in your packet, if I got my right, that's where it starts. Yes. And so Mr. Johnson's got a report for us, and there's some other things that the applicant has presented in there as well. So, Mr. Johnson, why don't we turn to you first for, you can walk us through your memos.
Okay, well, the planning commission's holding a public hearing tonight for Dowd Landscaping to establish a contractor yard. We had a preliminary meeting last month, actually the month before, in August to consider their preliminary site plan, and they provided us with a new site plan that addresses many of the questions that we had regarding parking, number of employees, storage of outside materials, and those business operational sort of characteristics. So they provided much of that information, including of pollution prevention measures as well. In reviewing this, I had written this before I realized there was a public hearing this evening for that, so you'll have to ignore that part of my report. Probably the biggest item of concern I would have is the fact that their site plan shows that property to the north of their site would be included in part of their operation. So it's on another property. And the concern I have is that when you grant a special use permit, you grant it for a specific parcel or parcels, whatever they put on the application and whatever is contained in the public hearing notice. So if the property to the north where they have two of the buildings being used is not part of the public hearing notice or not part of their application, you really legally can't grant then the use of those two buildings for their self-storage and equipment storage as part of the special use permit. So maybe that's information I don't have. I would ask the clerk and the city manager whether the notice contained both addresses, 228 and 226 North Main. If that was part of the application. 260, I think, is too north. But, that's probably my biggest concern.
No, it just indicates 228.
Okay, so their site plan shows that they will be using two of the buildings for self-storage and equipment storage on the property to the north. And if that wasn't advertised, wasn't part of their application, then for what property are we granting the special use permit? And legally, when you have to include in the notice the property that's being considered for the special use permit. If that wasn't part of it, then you legally can't grant it. And I think I pointed that out in my previous report as well. So that item hasn't been addressed. Some other items in my report have to do with the removal of the barbed wire as a condition of approval. The parking situation, the parking along North Main Street, there's one spot that probably should be removed because it has to be set back 10 feet, and that's something they could do. Landscaping, I put in my report some landscaping requirements per your ordinance, but you have the ability to modify that landscaping along the east lot line that backs up to the park, or the front lot line along North Main Street. And then the other requirement is that the ordinance requires that any landscaping be served by an underground irrigation system. You should decide whether that existing use would have to put that in for any proposed landscaping. Lighting, they do show some building lights. The ordinance requires that those be fully shielded, so we need some information on that. And then they intend to use the dumpster on the adjoining property, which that's probably the property to the north. So that's it. Any questions from the planning commission?
Yes, Ms. Brennan?
I didn't see anything where they had done anything with the condition of the fence.
They putting the screen across the front.
You know, the rest of the event, and
Yes.
thought we had discussed that.
Did we discuss that last meeting? I know we did for the preferred landscaping to the south there, but that would also be an item of concern whether you would want the fence replaced or brought up to a better looking condition.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson? Okay, thank you. Okay. So since it's a public hearing, we will open the floor for anybody who would like to address this piece of property that's being considered for special land use. All right. Seeing none, we will close this public hearing. And we will now open the public hearing for the proposed zoning map changes where we're changing RR to R1. the proposal. That starts in your packet, page 11 is the list of their properties, and then there's two maps all the way to the last couple of pages in your packet as well. It shows you the, I think page 118 is the old one, and 119 is the one with the changes. So I don't know, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Womack, if one of you want to give kind of an overview of the rationale behind us making these changes from RR to R1.
Yeah, sure. I've written a couple of these emails today. So this body, the Planning Commission, has been reviewing the zoning map, which is, 12 years old at this point. And in light of the fact that the city is growing exponentially, we've got new neighborhoods being put in all the time, new commercial uses. Part of the proposal for the updating of the map was the elimination of the RR rural residential zoning district, which on page 118 is a green color. All those properties are also listed in the notice that was sent out. And under the old table of uses, the types of uses that were permitted on those properties include such things as farming, animal husbandry, mineral extraction, radio towers, airports, things that require a lot of land, huge parcels. Well, the city is moving much more towards neighborhoods, smaller parcels, residential uses, that kind of thing. So I believe that the proposal is to convert these properties that are essentially all being used for residential purposes anyways, to the next least restrictive use, which is the R1 single-family residential use. So I don't have the new table of uses in front of me, but under the new table of uses, which I don't think we changed anything in the R1 residential zoning district, the permitted uses in the new zoning district would be single-family homes, single-family dwellings, home occupations, adult and child foster care, public parks, playgrounds, community buildings, private non-commercial recreation facilities, accessory structures, and then there's also some special land uses, which would be bed and breakfasts, residential plan unit developments, community centers, including nonprofit agency centers, churches, mosques, synagogues, etc., municipal buildings, utility buildings, private schools, and adult daycare homes, I guess. Of course, that's on our website for anybody to look at. So those would be the permitted uses on these parcels after this change, if this change is made.
It's also important to point out that the proposal is to change these properties from rural residential to R1, and that would be, you would hold a public hearing as the Planning Commission, and the City Council makes the final decision. So any uses that are currently in use, if there are any active farms or operations, or uses that would become non-conforming if this rezoning is approved, are allowed to continue as is until they no longer exist. So it just says no more new uses, farm-type uses can be permitted in the R1 zone district.
And there is at least one of these parcels that's currently being farmed, and it'd be a
Correct.
Right. Planning Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Johnson or Mr. Womack on this? Okay, so we will open the floor for any public comments on this proposed change from RR to R1.
Would we be able to use our acre and a half property for a small greenhouse with no bigger than 20 by 20 foot? Would that be still rural residential?
Do you have a greenhouse?
We do not currently have one. We were considering putting one in.
That's a good question. I don't have that thing in front of me here, so I don't know.
not a commercial greenhouse.
No, not a commercial greenhouse.
Yeah, a greenhouse that would fit under the accessory building ordinance would work, yeah.
The tax implications, are we taxing just on the domicile, or are we taxing on the acreage? the size of the lot.
Yeah, outside of my expertise zone, I don't know anything about taxes.
The assessor has indicated to me before on other rezonings that the taxation is based on the current use.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's not gonna, it shouldn't change just based on the rezoning.
Okay.
No, the map that you're speaking of with the green area and the table of information is available on your website?
Yep, so if you go onto the website, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, I believe it says important documents. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick.
No, that's fine, I'm sure I could navigate and find that, but I do have another question, when will the city council vote on this?
We don't have a definite time frame. We're going through a couple of these. I suspect it probably won't be till January, February at the earliest.
So if I were to go to the website and had additional questions, the opportunity would exist for me to express that?
So what the planning commission does is we recommend to the city council, we say we've held the public hearings and we recommend that you make this change. The authority to actually make the change is theirs, and they will have it on their agenda. There'll be several times for you to weigh in on it while they deliberate. So you'll get notice again at the city council meetings.
That helps me, thank you.
Oh, yeah, could you, for the clerk, can you give her your names, please, so we can have that for our minutes?
Although you're not required to if you would like to.
Not a problem.
You can just.
She can hear you from your holler.
Greg Adelman, Adelman. And Elizabeth Adelman.
If you have further questions, please contact me.
Thank you so very much.
Anybody else, any questions? Yes, to the court, Robert.
Ken Coulter, and I own the Ground Stream Farm up there. Has been in the family since the 50s. They might understand that I will be continuing to allow to do that. And tax-wise, it's going to remain basically the same.
Yes, but what the assessor has told us is that the way that it's zoned doesn't change anything. It's only the use of the property that affects the taxes.
And you can continue to farm it, but you would not be able to then put an airport there.
Well,
If you were to change it, you would have to change it to a use that's permitted in the R1 district if it got rezoned to that.
Or rezone it.
Or request rezoning.
This is a
If in the future it changed hands, say he, as an heir sometime, gave it to a son or daughter, does that still?
Non-conformity, as far as I'm aware, runs with the land, so it doesn't matter who owns it. So you can continue to use it if a son or somebody else was taken on.
that is possible, I guess, but I am pursuing having it developed when the money's right. I think it's for the best of everybody concerned.
You're gonna grow houses.
Yeah, some HUD housing and stuff, maybe. No. So I'm just concerned with if I continue what I'm doing, at this point, it might take a few years to,
what you're already doing can continue.
just make sure I'm allowed to do that. What about animals at all, or is that?
If you're currently using it for animals, you'd be allowed to continue to use it for whatever animals you're currently using for, but you couldn't go from, say, raising chickens to raising cows.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's my main concern at this point.
Nathan Peasley. I live at 201 Pine Street. Looking at this notice that we've received in the mail, both the property to the west and directly to the east of us are being changed to R1. Our property is not being changed, or it does not, it's not inside the notice.
I did see that when I was putting the notices together, and this might be an error of the previous 2007 map, similar to what we've always assumed was the spot zoning, the White Pine Medical Center in the B3 district. Yeah, I noticed that property was already zoned R1, at least according to the old map. And unfortunately, that's all I have to go by. I don't have any specific lists of properties from 2007 that were included in the map. So based on the fact that it was already R1, I decided not to include it, just based on that.
So, yeah, so your neighbors are changing because they are right now.
Okay. So it doesn't affect our, okay.
Good. Yes, sir.
Yes, Scott Robinson and Sandy Robinson, 221 Pine Street. And we farmed the land since '62, and it's going to be Lady Birded over to my sister. So as long as we continue the use as is, under the right to farm and the generally accepted agricultural.
As long as the use stays the same. Yes, sir.
I guess to piggyback on that, if they're our next door neighbors, we're also working on building a farm in our backyard just for personal use. But is it only commercial that would be affected by that, or?
Well, I mean, there's a fine line, I think, between commercial and a personal use farm. I don't want to be into a position of having to determine what's personal and what's, a commercial farm. Now, I don't think raising livestock has ever really been permitted in the city. But so long as it remains a personal farm for personal use, then I don't see why that wouldn't be permitted. Because that's permitted on any property in the city regardless.
All right.
When you say personal farm,
Garden.
oh,
Yeah, so I didn't, kind of a fine line there.
I'm not in my garden.
Yes, sir.
The property to the north of me, which is used to be the old slaughterhouse, many years ago, is now a tree farm. And my understanding that property is within the city. And I didn't see that being rezoned.
I believe that property is already RR.
Already RR, yes, R1.
I'm sorry, R1. That property is already R1.
But it's also going to be the same with, I didn't see one of those maps, so.
It'll be the same as
uh, Be the same with mine. Okay, just wondering.
Yeah.
Just for correction, there used to be horses on this street.
Well, of course, I've been here now for 3.5 years. What happened before that?
We're glad you're here.
Did I see I saw another hand with the mail? Anybody else? Thanks, sir. Thanks for sharing. Glad that you came here. Any other comments? Okay.
You need to explain to them that they can leave at any time.
Well, yeah, so I'm gonna officially close the public hearing, but in just a minute, you're welcome to stick around if you want to, where eventually we will maybe entertain a motion to send this on to city council with our recommendation to they approve it, but if you don't want to wait around while we're doing the rest of the business, you won't disturb us if you slip out, so.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for answering our questions.
Yeah. All right, so, folks, let's look at item A under new business. On 141 South Main, there is a lot of information in your packet that has given us some historical background of what took place, and there's still some questions as exactly what took place, but it should all be in there. So, Mr. Johnson, you want to try to sort it out a little bit for us?
Let me start with 2 seconds, Joe, just so you know why it's coming to you. most of this board is aware that Mr. Truesdale did attempt to convert his property to some kind of veterans center a year or so back. He's been having a hard time selling his property. He's now asked the city to allow him to split his property, which currently consists of a commercial storefront on Main Street side and a single-family residence on the, I think it's Church Street side. But they're on one piece of property. I don't have the information in front of me, but occurred 10, 12 years ago. And Mr. Truesdale was able to convince the planning commission at that time to grant him a special land use to put two primary uses on one property. I'm not entirely sure that would be approved or approvable today, but that appears to be what happened back then. So the question is, and I think there's evidence both ways on this, whether we could allow Mr. Truesdale to make that split. And of course, we're talking about it from a zoning perspective at this point, because as Mr. Hall pointed out to me before the meeting, there are some other considerations that would have to be taken, probably through a zoning or a site plan review. Specifically, the water and sewer would have to be split. There's a tunnel between the two buildings that would have to be permanently caved off, walled off in some way. So at this point, we're just talking about the zoning aspect of it, and I think the primary problem is the single-family residence, because we do have laws on the book that indicate that any parcel, single-family residential parcel created in the B2 district must meet the R1 zoning requirements. I think the word used is alter, and I'm sure Mr. Johnson's going to have some discussion on that aspect of it. But I think if you're splitting it, you're altering it. You're altering the characteristics of the property that it's on, which to me indicates you'd have to meet the R1 requirements, which includes 30-foot setbacks on both front and rear, 10-foot setbacks on sides, amongst other things. And I don't think that the single-family residence, as it currently exists, can meet those requirements. I don't have dog in fights. I don't care one way or the other. I just think we should follow the law, because as you see, when we potentially don't follow the law, these types of situations can haunt the future. So I guess Mr. Johnson has some words that he put together in a memo, and I'd appreciate if he'd walk us through his opinion.
I will try to walk you through this. I had earlier given Mr. Womack a memo a couple weeks ago, September 11th, in response to his request about possibly splitting off the house for the Truesdale property, and I think you have the memo in your packet. And then after I received the packet, I had a little more information as to how that happened back in 2009. So I kind of revamped my September 11th memo, and I gave that to you just before the meeting tonight. So I think, first of all, for a typical lot split would not come before the planning commission. That is an administrative decision by the zoning administrator and the assessor, and they simply determine whether or not it meets the land division ordinance and does it meet the zoning ordinance to create this new lot. It typically would not come before the planning commission. I think we're looking for some advice here, or maybe a little bit of history. So my memo does acknowledge that when this was approved in 2009 as a special use permit, it may have been done in error because you can't have two principal uses on one lot. I think that was the rule then, and that is the rule today. We do have a section 40-577E that requires a special use permit for the limited purpose of permitting the continued residential use of an existing dwelling in the B2 zoning district. So there is a provision to find a house in the B2 zone, you can get a special use permit to continue using it as a residential dwelling, and then that special use permit doesn't expire after a year. But you have to have, in order to do that, a lot that contains a house does not have to have frontage on Main Street. And I think that in number 2 in my memo this evening, the word in italics there toward the end, I said the existing parcel containing the future store in the house, however, does have frontage on Main Street. So we'll take the word not out of there. So in order, so that the house that's there doesn't really qualify under section 577, because it's on a parcel that does have frontage on Main Street. So it gets a little more confusing. Stop me at any time if you're not following this, because I'm not sure I'm following it either.
If I could just interject for 1 second though, if the split did occur though, it would not any longer have Main Street frontage.
Right, and so he has asked, a couple things happen here. If by asking to split it, and if the split is granted somehow, they would correct the situation that occurred back in 2009 where you had two principal uses on one lot, which arguably maybe is zoning violation. So if the split occurred and the house was on one lot and the furniture store was on the other lot, that would correct that zoning issue. And it would also say that the house on Church Street is in the B2 zone. It would no longer have frontage on Main Street. So it would meet the criteria for you to grant a special use permit to allow that house to continue to be used as a house. You with me so far? So the sticking point is, by creating that new lot in the B2 zone, there's a provision in 577 that says, special use to expand, restore, or alter an existing dwelling shall be subject to the R1 district requirements, including lot size and setbacks. The new lot that Mr. Trusa wants to create for the house clearly does not meet the lot size, lot width, or setback requirements for the R1 zone. It doesn't. I think it's a matter of how we interpret this phrase or this language that says, especially used to expand, restore, or alter an existing dwelling. Does that mean that by creating the lot for this house, does that mean that the lot has to meet the R1 zone? Or, take it literally, the building, the house is not being expanded, it's not being restored, it's not being altered. The lot is, you could say, well, the lot is altering the situation. And I think that's a matter for the zoning administrator to decide that in his function as a zoning administrator, to decide altering means, yeah, you're creating the lot, so you have to meet the R1 zoning district requirements. I think that's a judgment call by the zoning administrator in this case, and if he decides that, then they have to meet the R1 zoning requirements.
I should clarify that Mr. Johnson is correct. The reason I brought it to the planning commission is both for a historical perspective from anybody who might have been on the board at that time, and also just from some general advice, because I do recognize that this is most likely my decision to make. But it would be nice to have that historical perspective and advice.
Mr. Watson, any question?
Yeah, I have completely forgotten now, I apologize.
Mrs. Garber?
That happens when you're new. I looked at the planning commission minutes, June 1st, and there was a site plan review, discussion.
Just one clear, June 1st, 2009?
Yes, I'm sorry, 2009, thank you.
Yep.
Site plan review, they had a discussion, no need for, or on the need for a special land use, and what they discussed was setbacks and window sizes. There were no discussions about variances. On July 6th of '09, Mr. Lonnie discussed parking requirements, and Mr. Truesdale discussed color schemes for the building. And then 7-9, which is the city council, they approved the special land use. There was no discussion on need for variances, and they passed it with a resolution. And apparently no one saw a need for variances. And if they had followed the law, I don't think this would have ever happened.
Yeah, and back then, the city council approved a special use permit, which might have been the case back then. They don't now, but they might have back then. So there may have been some rules that have been taken out of the book that we aren't aware of. But we're operating under today's rules, and we know that they want to create a lot for this house to split them. They're in the B2 zone, so I think it does boil down to what does the word alter mean, and whether they need to create that lot for the house. Does it have to meet all the R1 regulations?
Well, the B2 district, the purpose, it has to be consistent with the intent and purpose of the zoning district in which it is proposed to locate the use. It's in a B2 district, and that's to concentrate community retail and service activities in a single core area. And so I think we would just be muddying the waters by even trying to split that. There's 5.5 feet behind the house, and there's, 12 feet to the west, and then there's a storage building there. They share a furnace and water heaters. Yeah.
Kind of, hold on, Mr. Conley, I have actually a couple questions. So, if this property stayed the way it was, could two separate businesses be allowed to be in those two separate areas? If the residential area was a business and the front area was a business, would that be allowed?
We adopted, or I think we adopted a new principal use regulation earlier this year that I think it would require that they both function as kind of one entity. And if the two businesses didn't function as one entity, then maybe not. But historically, the house was used as a house, and so the parking regulations would apply to the house. Once you convert it to a commercial use, okay, now we have a different set of regulations that are going to apply to this use. And until we know what that use is, we aren't sure how to apply those regulations.
Okay, and then I'm not sure I have the second question, I'm going to wait.
Mr. Nixon?
I'm not too sure that the house and the business are far enough apart to even meet fire code standards, because how close they are. If we were to try to split them, I don't think that would, I don't think that's going to fly. We know that they're connected underground, and as we've discussed, parking. If we tried to, the house itself doesn't have enough parking, the business doesn't have enough parking, and so if we split them, okay, together they have enough parking, but if we split them, neither one of them do. So if you wanted to try to have a business in the house, you don't have any parking. If you wanted to have business without the house, you don't have any parking. I don't see how it would work.
And those are zoning ordinance regulations that you have to meet. Looking at the approval back in 2009, the parking issue was raised, and the planning commission had the ability to waive or modify some of those parking regulations, which they did. And so that hasn't changed. They received approval from the planning commission for the furniture store, and so I think that's still in effect. And as far as splitting the property in terms of fire purposes, that's up to the fire department. The line doesn't change the distance between the buildings. If they were too close, if they were approved back in 2009 with a building permit, chances are that somebody looked at that.
Really?
Yeah.
The loading zone that is shown on the site plan is part of where the residential garage is.
Yeah, there's a elevator in the garage to load things into the house.
There's also a number of parking spots for the furniture store, which are in front of the residential house. One of the proposals that I made to Mr. Truesdale was that he sell the house as potential office space to work in conjunction with the retail space that the furniture store provides. Now, I don't know 100%, but I don't know why this wouldn't also be able to operate in a way similar to some of the other businesses downtown where they have an accessory apartment attached. I'd have to look at the regulations pretty hard, but that means they could theoretically use it as rental housing as a potential use.
So, as was pointed out, I mean, this is not our call to make. We're just here to maybe give some input to Mr. Womack and his role as the zoning administrator. And, then if he makes a decision that Mr. Truesdale is not happy with, then he has recourse to the ZBA, to appeal that. But
In the table of uses, single-family housing specifically is not allowed. Is that was I looking at an old, or maybe a new one?
So which is on B2?
Yeah.
Are you looking at the actual chart, of the table, the old table?
The table isn't,
Table's no longer part of the ordinance. We have a list of uses for the B2 zone and the R1 zone, but
okay, then I was
the
looking at
format,
the old one.
what I'm talking about is simply the format. It's no longer in table format. Although I think Mr. Womack put that in your packet. Who was our planner at that time? Do you remember this?
Currently,
Yeah, it was LSL planning, probably Carmen Avatini.
it was.
Surprised he didn't bring out setbacks.
Well, like I said, in your report, there was wasn't any discussion about that.
Yeah.
In the B2 zone, there are no setbacks. Oh, okay. No required setbacks. He did address that at the planning commission for the furniture store. The house, I don't think he brought that up. Although in the B2 zone, there are no setback requirements.
So that would nullify the setbacks.
Yeah, so it would be okay. The house where they put it was okay in terms of the B2 setbacks. So here we are. And here we are. Yes.
Well, for what it's worth, for your zoning administration decisions, I think in that section 4577E, that word alter, I think that if the lot is split, I think it's altered. I mean, I think that's a fundamental change from what was originally approved, so I don't see how that could be germane for them. So, but,
Clear as mud, thanks.
yeah.
I appreciate it.
So, before we move on to this, any other input you want to give Mr. Womack, because he's the one that's got to make the decision on this one.
Well, he was mad at us one other time.
Yeah.
Okay, on that.
I generally think that all of the options that were presented as possibilities for splitting this are going to create way more issues than we currently have with the lot, and I think that making that decision would be a mistake.
I agree for what it's worth.
All right, well, thank you for your input, I'm sure we will hear more. All right, full business, so.
What are you doing down there?
Let's, item A, under old business, we are returning to the special land use site plan request at 228 North Main Street. I think that Mr. Johnson pointed out in his report, there's a number of things that we need to go through and address before we proceed any farther. So if I could just walk you through here and item number 2 on his memo, so this is on the September 26, 2019 memo that Mr. Johnson provided us, item number 2. I think that we probably do need that on the official site plan. We need to explain, and we're going to have a proper public hearing if those buildings on a different property are going to be used, then we need to have that so noted in the public hearing that it's not only 228 North Main, but 260 North Main as well.
Mr. Owens, it might be appropriate to have the applicant maybe answer some of these questions since he is here.
Yeah, I think there's
or, of course, you could say, get together with the city manager and explain yourself, but he's here, so.
Okay. Well, that one, I don't know what there is to explain. We need that on the site plan.
I guess an alternative way to put it would be, hey applicants, are you only using 228 or are you also using the property to the north? Because he seems to indicate that he is, but I don't know if it's possible for him to run his business without those. I guess I would just like to hear that.
Okay. Mr. Bell?
Yes. Yeah, I will
I'll just reapply for a special land use for the north building then too, to add to it, is that kind of what I should do? Because I am using it for storage. We were leasing it, it's kind of, when it was the tire shop, it was all one kind of use for the tire shop also.
If he's leasing it, could he put it on the site plan? I mean,
I don't see why not.
can you get a special land use for property you're leasing?
As long as the property owner signs the application form.
Okay.
Is there another use there now with those two buildings? Is there another business on the property?
No.
Is there another building on there besides the ones you're using?
There's, yes, to the north of that, that's that parcel between our shop and then the body shop, there's two buildings, and he does storage in both of those. And that's what they did. And we're using the southern building, and he does his thing in the northern building.
The legal description would probably just extend to the buildings you're using and not the building that's, the other building that's on the property. I mean, you'd have to be precise as to what legal description you're actually authorizing for the use of the contractor business.
So, Mr. Johnson, on his site plan, if he notes all of the buildings on 260, but designates which ones that he's asking special land use from us, since that's a part of the site plan that would get approved, then that would cover everything.
I believe so, yeah.
But we still need the property owner to...
They'd have to sign that they're granting, they're asking for a special use permit for this use on the property that will be operated by Mr. O'Dowd. And then the other use on the property, so then you have actually two uses on the same property. That's, I have to wrestle with that a little bit to see whether that's something you could do or not, given the principal use per lot issue that we just talked about with Mr. Truesdale. The fact that the special use permit doesn't divide the property legally, it's still one lot. You're just saying, this imaginary line, this side is contractor business, this side is not. I don't know what's actually there in storage for a building.
Page 85 shows the layout of the site. There's building 1, 2, and then 3. He's proposing to use building 2, I'm guessing, for the salt storage on your site there.
The equipment storage, we do have a salt building right behind that.
Well, we know.
That's the salt storage is number 2.
That's the only building, not the metal building in front of it.
We use the metal building also, yeah.
Well, otherwise there'd be a line drawn right down between the two buildings, so there's special land.
Okay.
But I'm with the planner on this one. You know, if there's 4 buildings on the site, he's only using 2 of them, that doesn't really matter. The entire site really needs to get a special land use. And we've got the issue of, well, part of it's warehousing, part of it's a landscaping business, the same issue we had before. And I get that there is a certain brevity to convenience, that the owner is saying, oh, well, I just own it all and you can use what you want and pay me for it. Under the city's zoning laws, that's not the way it works.
Are the uses that are currently on that northern lot conforming uses for that zone?
Warehousing in the B3 district. Kind of my approach to being zoning administrator is I don't look too deeply into the uses that are currently being used, because, of course, at some point they're going to try to change the use, and that's when we review them.
Right.
I agree, though, with Mr. Johnson, that this is one of those things where it's like, I get that it's convenient, but we either have rules and laws that we follow or we don't.
I guess I was curious that if it was stated in such a way to where he's getting a special land use for his lot, but he's storing the vehicles off-site on another lot where that's already allowed. Shouldn't be done that way.
It's not just the vehicles, it's the salt.
Okay, that's good. Well, whatever, I couldn't remember exactly what was being done in which building, but the principle of, would he be allowed
could we find a way to say this is being stored off-site on someone else's property, as long as it's a conforming use on that property?
This is one of those things that lawyers like to call legal fiction. That, yes, we get that.